It's budget season. Time to pay attention. I'm Charles Blaine, and this is Texas Tomorrow.
Are you worried about your kids' future? You should be. You're listening to Texas Tomorrow with Charles Blaine. Join Charles as he talks about the people and issues that are affecting you and your family at the local level of government.
July 1st is the start of the fiscal year for a lot of local governments. Not all, but many. This means that everything resets. A budget is presented, laying out new priorities, and this is typically when we see the biggest expansions in local government, in the form of new programs, departments, new hires. And so after a budget is presented, a series of workshops follow, and then a budget is approved, or sometimes, but rarely, rejected. It's always good to be involved or at least aware of what your local government is doing, but it's especially important now. Budgets are arguably the most important thing your local government will do. That's because anything else that they want to do can't be accomplished unless it's funded through the budget. So would they prioritize or deprioritize? Would they increase spending on or would they decrease spending on? Will all have an impact on your services, the infrastructure that you use, and your overall service delivery. And it also lets you know if the priorities of your local elected officials who say they represent you are the same as your priorities, because they always should be. Equally as important is a budget deficit. A lot of major cities, and Texas included, run budget deficits. Houston has a $160 million budget deficit that's being closed by one-time relief aid. Dallas is working to close a $38 million deficit. Fort Worth is looking to close a $100 million funding gap for long-term projects while spending federal relief aid on other projects. And Austin is looking at a $13 million budget deficit next year. Local officials will tell you that that's just how government operates. But it doesn't have to. Not every city, county, or school district in this state runs a deficit. Plano, for instance, passed a budget with an anticipated $4 million surplus. Notably, Round Rock ISD was facing a $22 million budget deficit, and they were able to identify $30 million in cuts to avoid it. Imagine that. But for a deficit, they probably wouldn't have found $30 million in cuts. So there will always be competing interests and priorities. What gets funded just depends on the willingness of your elected officials to prioritize them. Unlike Round Rock ISD, too often there's a willingness to increase taxes, take out bonds, or add additional fines and fees to fund whatever projects they want to pursue, rather than being introspective and finding places to cut spending. While raising revenue might mean that you might feel or see an immediate benefit in the form of construction projects or service improvements, those things add to your overall cost of service, ultimately your cost of living. So you'd hope that these officials would look for places to reduce, like Round Rock ISD did, instead of asking you for more. The underlying point of all this is that you guys need to be involved. In the same way that you should be paying attention regularly and holding elected officials accountable throughout the year, it's especially important now. And it truly doesn't take much. It can be as simple as watching budget workshops, which most local governments conduct and promote online, or going line by line through your local budget and coming up with your own suggestions. Some residents form groups to go through it together and identify ways the budget can better reflect the needs of their communities, and some just follow the process and speak up if they hear or see something questionable. No matter how you do it, just pay attention to what's going on with your local budget, because how local governments spend your money is just as important as how much of your money they choose to spend. Thanks for tuning in. As always, if there's an issue happening in your community, please let us know. We'd be happy to cover it, and leave us some feedback on this episode as well. Make sure you share it on social media. Thanks for tuning in.
So I hope you took something away from this, and if you did, make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you see fit, and make sure you tune in for next week's episode of Texas Tomorrow.